UFC Fight Night Vegas 76, Strickland versus Magomedov just took place, and I'm going to go through the entire card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event, giving my reaction and breakdown to every single fight on the card, and my overall event recap as well, starting with the early prelim opener of Alexandr Romanov versus Blagoy Ivanov. This was such a terrible way to start off the card. It was basically Alexandr Romanov picking at Blagoy Ivanov at range, landing a few inside leg kicks, landing some decent straight punches, I will give him that, but this was a classic overweight heavyweight performance where both of them just looked absolutely terrible. And now and again, Romanov would get a takedown at the end of the round to secure that round for himself. But Blagoy Ivanov is, at the end of the day, and it's sad to say this because this is the top 15 of the UFC heavyweight division. The top 15, Blagoy Ivanov is a fat old man. And he has no athleticism, no ability to close distance, just throws hooks on a counter as Romanov picks at him at range. Really bad start to the card, but Romanov gets it done, so congratulations to him. I picked him to win. We move on. Ivana Petrovic versus Luana Carolina. Luana Carolina gets it done, does a little bit more damage to Ivana Petrovic in this fight. Ivana Petrovic has no grappling ability, no striking ability. We find that out now. Of course, she beat some great opponents on the regional scene. 7-1 opponent in her last fight. Beat some other decent opponents. Had an amateur career where she fought some good, experienced amateur women's fighters. But turns out in this fight, she has no idea how to throw a punch effectively. No idea how to throw kicks effectively either. Slow as a heavyweight with some of her head kicks, and no ability to grapple either. We find that out in the UFC after she goes 6-0 undefeated as a prospect. Weird way to find it out, but Luana Carolina wins. Another terrible fight. Terrible fight between them, where Luana Carolina did a bit more damage in the clinch. We move on to another fight up the card. It finally gets interesting. Guram Kutateladze versus Elves Brener. Now, to start the first round, Elves Brener looked pretty good. He was landing a bunch of good shots on Guram Kutateladze. Had a really good start of the first round, so this wasn't a thing where Guram was dominating the whole fight and Elves Brener came back in the third round. Don't get me wrong, it was a comeback win, but it wasn't a traditional comeback win that we know to expect and we know about, where a guy gets dominated and then Darren Elkins is his way back into it against Mirsad Bektic. But Elves Brener versus Guram Kutateladze, Brener was doing pretty good early on in the first round, keeping up with Guram, and then Guram had a hell of a moment at the end of the first round, rocked Brener with a brutal elbow on the break from a clinch, landed a bunch of follow-up shots, rocked him, landed a right hand on the chin, dropped Elves Brener, or hurt Brener to the ground, and he started going for him, and Brener started shooting in, and they separated, and Brener survives the first round after being really badly hurt and wobbled. Round two, Guram wins round two again, in my opinion, but he only wins it based on a moment where, even though Elves Brener was doing good at the start of that round and landing good kicks on Guram, Guram was sort of like going to the body, and he landed a good left hook to the body on Brener. It looked like it hurt him for a second, and he kind of covered up against the cage at the end of the round, and Guram had another round in the bank. Won the end of the second round, landed some really good shots to end that round as well, was digging to the body a bunch, and I thought going into the third, Guram's got this fight in the bag. He's absolutely got this fight in the bag. And in the third round, they keep it even. Guram's kind of getting the better of some things. He's landing some good shots. And then Elves Brener, it wasn't the punch that rocked Guram Kutateladze, okay? It was a body shot before that. He landed a really nasty left hook to deliver on Guram Kutateladze, hurt him quite a bit to where Guram was hunching over. Then he lands a flying knee on Guram, and Guram takes it, but he's definitely hurt to the body still. So he's trying to clinch on and get a hold of Elves Brener. And on the break from that clinch, Brener lands a shot basically to the neck of Guram Kutateladze, and he just absolutely shuts down like Shane Burgos against Edson Barboza. Crazy win from Elves Brener. Massive underdog. Guram Kutateladze was allegedly top level, but we only thought he was top level based on his performance over Damir Ismagulov, but then again, he has a win over Gamrot, so maybe Armand Saruki and Damir Ismagulov, Mateusz Gamrot are just all terrible. And maybe that's what we found out tonight, as we're going to get to later on the card. But great win from Elves Brener. Another shooter box guy getting hurt early on. Guram made the fatal error of hurting a shooter box fighter early on, because they always come back. We move on to another fight up the card. Yana Santos versus Karol Rosa. Honestly, it arguably could go Yana Santos' way. Very, very close fight. Could have gone either way. I genuinely wouldn't have been mad whatever way it went, but let's be real, if it did go to Yana Santos, I'd have absolutely lost my mind at the decision. But on the stats, you arguably should give this fight to Karol Rosa, but she landed some shots where she seemed calm at everything Yana was throwing at her, because Yana was going to the body with kicks, landing some decent shots to the head, kicking the legs of Karol Rosa as well. But when Rosa was going forward, she was calm, patient, and when she hit Yana Santos would like hurry away and scurry away to the corner and cover up quite a bit and wobble backwards for a second. So the visuals of the shots that Rosa landed outweighed the visuals of the shots that Yana Santos landed, and that's why Rosa got the win, I guess. Very close fight, though. Genuinely could have gone either way. We move on to another fight up the card, which was Joanderson Brito versus Westin Wilson. Brito does what Brito does, man. He's been on a bit of a roll recently in his career. Very impressive performance against Westin Wilson. Very interesting name from him as well. Joanderson Brito makes it how many in a row now does he have? 3 in a row? 3 finishes in a row, all in the first round. I know they've been guys making their debut and not ideal matchups to progress him up the top of the division, but I don't mind the idea of the Dan Ige fight. We'll see what happens there. But it was basically just Westin Wilson trying to throw some stuff at range, not really getting respect from Brito early on, and then Brito started hunting for the head, leaning over his shots, rushing forward, and Westin Wilson was just James Vick defensing his way out of there, putting his arms out, looking away, eventually got caught on the chin. Then he goes for a leg on Joanderson Brito. Silly move, ends up getting his face smashed in on the ground. And Westin Wilson doesn't get the submission. Joanderson escapes it by grabbing the cage, which are allowed to do in MMA nowadays, so no harm done there. It's completely legal, apparently. No one gets punished for it, other than Leon Edwards. Either way, Joanderson Brito just smoked him on the ground with ground and pound and KO'd him badly. So, great win from Joanderson Brito, but we need to see him step up the competition now. I'm sick of seeing him fight people making their debut. We move on to Kevin Lee versus Rinat Fakhretdinov. Now, this was shocking. Not that Kevin Lee lost. Everyone knew Kevin Lee was going to lose. But then again, everyone thought that Bonfim was going to win. So, either way. Not that Kevin Lee lost, but that Rinat Fakhretdinov made it so easy. The idea was that maybe Kevin Lee would keep up in the first, and then Rinat would take over with cardio and dominate the later rounds, maybe getting a finish in the late second or third round. But instead, we see Kevin Lee get smoked early on. He lands a couple of pull counter right hands on Rinat Fakhretdinov, and then Rinat Fakhretdinov steps in after his jab. Lee is leaning away with his hands away from his face, not looking at his opponent, and Rinat tags him with a right hand. Drops him badly, really badly. Kevin Lee jumps up, tries to go for a takedown, very Oliveira-esque, shoots in for the takedown, leaves his head in a guillotine position, and then is stuck in that guillotine where Rinat chokes on him for about an extra 10 seconds after he's out cold. Herb Dean, wake up. What are you doing? If the guy doesn't respond immediately, you can see the choke is in. You know he's only got about 10 seconds before he's limp, regardless of how hard he fights out of it. That choke was locked in deep. I feel like Herb Dean messed up stopping that so late, but either way, Kevin Lee gets choked out cold and knocked down. Maybe we'll see him against a more reasonable opponent, because I'm sorry to say it, Kevin Lee, you're not the main character, you're not that good, and you need to get better. So yeah, a lightweight that can't win at welterweight. Very rare. You need to go back to the drawing board and look for an opponent of like Tim Means or something like that. No Rinat Fakhretdinov for you. We move on. Up the card. Bruno Ferreira versus Nursulton Ruziboev. Nursulton wins. Impressive performance. Best win of his career in his debut against Bruno Ferreira. Undefeated 10-0. And he caught the kick of Bruno Ferreira. Landed a right hand. Bruno Ferreira got hit by the right hand. Definitely felt it. Went down. More of an off-balance knockdown because he's had his leg caught as well. But in the back of his head slams off the canvas. And then Ruziboev lands some big follow-up shots afterwards as well. So really impressive first round finish from Ruziboev. But crazy, man. Ruziboev, again, a guy who was just coming off a win over like a 12-12 guy on regionals. Lost to some lackluster opponents. Been to decisions with some people as well. Just goes out there and smokes Ferreira in the first round by KO. Another underdog on this card. This really was the night of the underdogs. But I feel like every card is like that now. So we'll see what happens moving forward. But Ruziboev gets a good win. And he's young. So if he improves, maybe he could be something at middleweight. But he might run into Sean Strickland and get smoked. That's the problem at middleweight. We move on. Up the card. Ismail Bonfim versus Benoit Saint-Denis. This one genuinely surprised me, okay? I could have seen Ruziboev beating Ferreira. You know what I mean? I could have seen some of the other results on this card happening. You know what I mean? We lose Guram to Elves Brener, maybe, because Guram's been out for so long and all this. But Ismail Bonfim, he's on a win in his debut. He's turning back around. He's got momentum. He hasn't been injured. He's got a good opponent in Benoit Saint-Denis. And Benoit Saint-Denis outstrikes him and outgrapples him. There might be something to this. Bonfim and Benoit Saint-Denis were kind of looking at Bonfim's arm, and Bonfim was sort of like gesturing towards his arm, and Benoit Saint-Denis was going, oh yeah, and pointing to his arm as well. And Bonfim's arm was messed up, so maybe one of those body kicks that was blocked hurt the forearm of Bonfim. Maybe that's what it was, because he was limp at the end of the fight. He couldn't lift it to clap his hands. He was clapping like on his stomach pretty much with one hand. So I feel like Ismail Bonfim pooped the bed a bit. He let Benoit Saint-Denis throw too many body kicks, and it's all fair and well saying, come on, bring it on. I don't care that you're body kicking me, but eventually the body kicks are going to be too much, and you take them on the forearms, and they're not going to feel too nice. So great job by Benoit Saint-Denis, bringing up the guard of Bonfim with the kicks, and then shooting his takedown, and proceeding to choke out Bonfim in round 1, which is crazy, because he's taken absolute bottom feeders to the second round. But Bonfim's the easiest win of his career. That's a sentence I never thought I'd ever say. Bonfim is the easiest win of Benoit Saint-Denis' career. Crazy. But that is this card. Really good win from Benoit Saint-Denis. Gets the rear naked choke at the end of round 1. We move on to another fight up the card. Ariane Lipski versus Melissa Gatto. I thought Melissa Gatto won this fight pretty clearly. I have no idea what the judges were watching. I don't know how they didn't give this to Melissa Gatto, but the fact that one of the judges gave this 30-27 to Ariane Lipski means that this was already a set-in-stone deal, that Lipski was going to win if it went to a decision. Melissa Gatto very clearly outstruck her in rounds 1 and 2. 28-16 in round 1 to Gatto. Not like Lipski landed the better shots. In fact, Gatto had a black eye going into the fight, and she gave Lipski swelling under her eye in that round. So the judges gave Lipski round 1 when Gatto outlanded her 28-16, okay? 28-16, and gave her a black eye and visible damage. 2 judges gave that round to Lipski. Then, round 2 was again another Melissa Gatto round, where she basically just out-kneed Lipski in the clinch, pretty much, held her against the cage the whole round, kneed her in the clinch over and over again, and did more work in the clinch than Lipski did. And then the judges gave that round to Gatto. At least one of the judges did. They had it 30-27, so crazy scoring, but whatever. The rig was in for Lipski. 30-27 is a pre-written scorecard. We get it. She's somewhat attractive, so you do you, UFC. Very close fight, though. I'm not going to say brutal robbery, but 30-27 is smelly. That is a smelly scorecard for that fight. We move on. Another fight up the card, which was Michael Morales versus Max Griffin. This was a great performance by Mike. No, I take it back. This was a win for Michael Morales. It wasn't a crazy good performance. It was a very close fight. Michael Morales could have lost the first round, but could have won the first round. Very close round. But definitely won the second and third, where he rocked Max Griffin on a few occasions. And fair play, Max Griffin has a hell of a chin, because he took some really big Superman punches, some big jump knees occasionally as well, I believe, that he landed, that sort of landed on the chin of Griffin, and he just took it. He got wobbled a few times in round 2, got wobbled a few times in round 3 as well. And Michael Morales, I think, lost round 1 based on the swelling around his eye. I think visible damage rule, you have to give that close round to Max Griffin. And he did get that close round on all the judges' scorecards, so no problem there. Round 2 and 3, Morales was just landing a different power. Griffin had no power to make Morales worry. Morales had power to make Griffin worry. And Griffin couldn't charge forward because he knew that Morales had that power. And one thing I will say is this. Great move by Morales to secure the fight for himself by getting a takedown in round 3. He stuffed every Griffin takedown, and some of them were really good entries. So Michael Morales' takedown defense is a huge part of his game, very on display in that fight. But his striking is so sloppy, I'm worried that eventually someone's going to KO him with a counter shot, because that chin is wide up in the air, very clunky striking, footwork all over the place. So he's young. I don't think he's ready for a ranked opponent next. That was the idea. Beat Max Griffin, get a Neil Magny. Something along those lines. I could see a Neil Magny beating him. So I think hold him back for a bit. Give him a Tim Means. Give him a Nicholas Dalby maybe, a little bit more approachable. And then give him a ranked opponent. Let's give him some time. Bring him back on the Brazil card in November. And then maybe early 2024, mid-2024, he finally joins the rankings because he has a few things he needs to work out with his striking, it seems. We move on. Up the card, Ismagulov versus Grant Dawson. Didn't see this one coming. I knew Grant Dawson would maybe out-grapple him for a round. My prediction was that Damir would win the second and third and adjust to the grappling of Dawson and, do what he did against Arman Tsarukyan, which was stuff a whole bunch of those takedowns. Arman Tsarukyan is a guy who went toe-to-toe with Islam Makhachev in the grappling. And before people say it was a younger Makhachev, it was a younger Tsarukyan. He was like 21 and took that fight on like 2 weeks' notice after a wedding that he just had. And he still went out there and went toe-to-toe in the grappling with Islam Makhachev. Damir Ismagulov, by the way, against Arman Tsarukyan, he got taken down and he got controlled. But he got back up so many times and stuffed a lot of those takedowns. And he stuffed 14 takedowns against Arman Tsarukyan. I feel like he stuffed 1 against Grant Dawson, which is crazy difference. I know this is MMA math, but it's literally like the hierarchy of MMA grappling. And maybe the heavy back take style of Grant just worked well against Damir in this matchup. Who knows? But that is a crazy level of skill that Grant Dawson showed to dominate like this. And this is a guy in Grant Dawson who I know that Leonardo Santos is a great grappler jiu-jitsu wise, but he got out wrestled by Clay Guida and beaten to a pulp in their fight. And Grant Dawson struggled with him in the grappling early on in their fight as well. So I just never saw this coming from Grant Dawson, but he looked the best he's ever looked, dominated Damir Ismagulov. Damir landed good shots in round 2 and had some moments where clearly he had an advantage on the feet. Dawson looked very hesitant on the feet, as I was predicting. But it was just like, he got dominated. He got his back taken every round. And it just makes me think, I think that's the most successful thing in MMA. To be able to take someone's back, I swear to God, escaping a body triangle from the back, from someone on your back with a body triangle, escaping that position, I genuinely think it's like a 1 in 100 chance that you're going to get out of that body triangle. Some people can turn it around if they have thin enough hips. But if someone really knows what they're doing on your back, you aren't escaping for the rest of that round. It's like a cheat code. Great win from Grant Dawson. Didn't see it coming because old man, terrible fighter Ricky Glenn, stuffed some of his takedowns, made him gas, and beat him to a pulp in round 3. But Damir couldn't do anything. So I think Damir should retire after that one. Grant Dawson, new monster to watch out for at lightweight. We'll see what he does. I think he beats all of the top guys. If he just did that to Damir, Arman couldn't do it. So he could get the back of everyone. You never know. Very good entries, good takedowns, good back control. We move on. Sean Strickland versus Abbas Magomedov. Great win by Sean Strickland. I'm not going to talk about this too much because I've already done a whole video on it. But Sean Strickland just rode out the first round against Abbas Magomedov. And that's all there is to it, pretty much. He rode out the first round against Abbas Magomedov, and then the fight was over, and Abbas had nothing more for Sean Strickland. I'm not even over-exaggerating. That's genuinely how the fight went. Abbas Magomedov outlanded Sean 32-11 in round 1. Tried for 60 strikes. So he missed a bunch. But 53% accuracy is still good. The problem was he was going for head kicks. He was going for massive overhand power shots, looking to KO Sean Strickland in round 1. And as soon as that didn't look like it was going to happen, he was looking up at the clock, shaking out his arms, looking over at his corner, looking for a break. And then round 2, he just folded to the pressure of Strickland, who just walked him down at snail's pace, put a jab on him, and broke him with it. Sean Strickland landed 98% to the head in this fight. I think he landed 1 body shot on Abbas when they, maybe like a teep to the body at range. That's all he landed to the body that entire fight. Everything else was a jab or a 2 to the head, and when Abbas covered up, some more shots instead. Abbas just folded after a round of cardio. Absolutely crazy to see. Middleweight never ceases to amaze me. Great win by Sean Strickland. He deserves a performance bonus, and I'm so happy he won. But I'm just confused again because middleweight never ceases to amaze me. Abbas, I know, wasn't top level, and that's why I picked Sean Strickland to win this one. But bring more than 3 minutes of cardio to a main event against a top 10 opponent, at least. People can step in on short notice and go full rounds. Whatever the rounds are, they'll go that distance. How are you not going over a round? What are you doing? You clearly aren't training. Strickland wins. Abbas gets exposed. We'll see what happens to him next. Great win from Strickland. He might have earned himself a title shot. I'm so happy he won. All I want to see is him absolutely roasting Israel Adesanya to smithereens for having a personal bathing servant growing up. We need Strickland to know about that so he can say it to Adesanya at a press conference. I know Adesanya will smoke Strickland, but I want to see him humiliated at a press conference. Goodbye.